Hello everyone and welcome to our channel. If you're new to me, my name is Brentan and today is very special because it marks the first week in our year-long yoga program called How to Move Your Body, where we're breaking down our body bit by bit, looking at all of our ranges of mobility and breaking everything into digestible segments so that we can understand where we're moving really well already and where we have some room to grow. And so our very first module starts with our foot. That's what today's video is all about. And this one, you don't actually need to join me on your yoga mat unless you want to do a little bit of experimentation on your own. This is really more of a lecture style class that will give you sort of the foundational knowledge that is helpful for when you step on your yoga mat and you start applying load into your feet. Next week, we're gonna take this on the mat. We're gonna do some foot mobility work. So we're gonna work out all of our toes, the muscles on the underside of the foot, even into the ankle and the foreleg a little bit. And then we will move on. Our third class in this series will be a standing foot mobility series, learning how to use the foot in all of our different standing postures. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about our sweet little feet a little bit. So first of all, quite obviously, they're the foundation of our body. And because of that, they sort of have a little dual action going on. There's a grounding force, and you can feel that in your foot, even if you just rock back and forth. And you can feel where the bony masses are. You feel that in the front of the foot, the ball mount of the foot runs left to right underneath the toe mounds, and the back of the foot comes at the heel. So there's a triangle of bony mass being formed in the foot. So when those points press down into the floor, that's really our grounding force. Everything else has the ability to lift. And the lift in our foot is referred to as the arch. And not just one arch, because I think sometimes we think about the foot as just the inner arch of the foot, but we actually have 3 arches in the foot that run along that triangle I was just speaking of. So of course we have the inner arch of the foot, but we also have the outside arch that runs along the pinky toe mound of the foot, and we also have an arch right underneath the ball mound. So the arches also create that nice triangular shape, and their job is anytime we push off of the foot, that's what's distributing the weight. And so we want to learn how to then use our feet so that that weight is being distributed evenly. And here's the thing, is that as we grow up, we learn to use our feet, and in a lot of cases we learn not to use our feet because we put them in shoes all day long. Our feet may have learned a different pattern for distributing that force. And so this is what our yoga practice can be really beneficial for, is figuring out how to redistribute the force in the foot evenly. So let's go back to the inner arch of the foot. So when you lift your toes off the ground, you can start to feel like, wow, my arch is really engaged there. And so the reason why that happens, let's maybe talk about that, is because there are ligaments. That's the pieces, soft tissue pieces that connect bone and bone together. So they're very strong. There's not a lot of mobility there. And these ligaments are connecting the underside of the foot from the heel all the way out to the toes. So you can see then why theoretically when we lift our toes, that creates more tension through those ligaments, and the ligaments pull up into the foot. So this is a very strong position for us because our ligaments support into the bony structure of the foot, and bones are very, very strong. And this is why our push-off position, this one right here, this is toes at 90 degrees. This is why this is such a strong position for us, because it's supported by really strong bone and ligament structures rather than it just being kind of muscularly created. So when we lift our toes, we can start to get a sense of, wow, okay, here's what my arches are like when they're kind of fully engaged, fully lifting. And then what a lot of us tend to have kind of a lot of weakness in this part of our body, which is why sometimes you'll hear yoga teachers say, lift your toes in a yoga pose, because they just want you to feel the inner arch of the foot engage. And so this can be a really powerful way to start training our foot to elevate the arches and to use our arch support a little bit more, which again, once we learn how to not use our feet by constraining it in shoes and all of that good stuff over the course of our lives, we may find we just don't have that sort of access that you would think would just be so right there. Like, yeah, my feet are supposed to do that. So the idea is lift your toes, feel the ligaments pull up, but now muscularly support that so you can lengthen your toe bones back forward and down. And so that's kind of the next stage of evolution in your yoga practice. You know, I've gone through years of lifting my toes in every single pose. Even now, sometimes I still lift my toes just to feel the arch. But then the next stage beyond that is figuring out, okay, how can I keep all of that and lengthen my toe bones back forward and down to the floor? So this is something that we will explore and experiment with as we move into our classes. We'll also look a little bit at the ankle because the ankle is just right there. And so a lot of our foot mobility has to do with our ankle mobility. As you'll see, we also have a lot of muscles that are intrinsic in the foot, which means they start and they stop in the foot itself. But we also have quite a few stabilizer muscles that are extrinsic. And so they actually start in the foreleg and they move down and they hook underneath the foot like a stirrup. And so that's why when you're balancing, for example, and you could even try this, like if you just stand up and you put one foot in front of the other, you'll start to feel that your feet are wobbling left to right on the ground. And as the feet wobble left to right on the ground, that's actually those stirrup muscles in the legs kind of figuring out, what's my job here? What's my job here? What's my job here? And renegotiating that in each moment that we're standing here. So that's what we're going to get into the next couple of weeks. We're going to do a lot of also toe mobility exercises because in theory, we should be able to move our big toe independently of our 4 other toes. And we should be able to have some independence, some range of motion, some control there. And unless we're practicing kind of toe mobility exercises, we've probably lost it, because that's just how the brain-body connection works. In order for our brain to understand that a movement is possible, we need to do it and we need to give it that input on a consistent basis. And that's how we improve at any skill, not just the skill to mobilize our bodies. So now that we've kind of talked a little bit about the purpose of the foot, the structure of the foot, now we can maybe look at, just for a couple of moments, like what happens when things go wrong in our feet. You may have flat feet, you may have plantar fasciitis, you may have any number of things, even bunions, for example. And a lot of women have bunions, especially if you're getting older and you've been wearing high heels for a really long time. So that's what a lot of our toe mobility exercises can help with. But let's also look at kind of when those structures aren't working for us in the best way, how does that affect up the body? Because whatever issues start in the foot, they don't end there, they end someplace else. So let's just consider right now that maybe I have a case of flat feet. And my case of flat feet would mean that my inner arches are really collapsed. And I'm going to try to like make this really obvious here. So if you have flat feet, it might not look quite as obvious. But let's say your flat-footedness makes it so that you collapse on the inner arch and you actually take more weight to the inseam of the foot. And as you take more weight to the inseam of the foot, I'm in this right now, so let's look together. As you take more weight to the inseam of the foot, you can see that my inner ankle bone is now lower than my outer ankle bone in space. Here's regular, here's flat-footedness, right? So if the inner ankle is going down to the floor now, collapsing down, because it's just following whatever the arch of the foot is doing. So if the arch of the foot is going down, my inner ankle is going down, which we could see would mean, okay, my inner knees kind of go down there, and my joints are compromised really all the way up the spine into the skeleton. You can see the same thing. This is a little bit less common, but for people who carry the weight on the outside of the foot, what would that do? It would collapse the outer ankle, it would collapse the outer knee, and again, that runs all the way up the skeleton. You can even see, and this is a little bit subtle to kind of to assess in each of ourselves, but if I were to carry my weight really forward in my feet, so my toes are now really dominant, really kind of gripping the floor, it sends my whole lower leg bone forward. It sends my knee forward. And what it probably is doing, because something then needs to be pulling back in order to counterbalance all this forward thing so that we're not like falling down to the floor. So if this is going forward, then what might be going back is my low back, as my tailbone kind of scoops under and my low back kind of lifts and pulls back this way in order to kind of counterbalance what's going on there. And now this may contribute to chronic posterior pelvic tilt, where we get really short back here. So we can again see how that plays all the way out. Now you want to look at the heels. We can do that too. If you take the heels, the weight more into the heels, your legs go more back. Something else has to tip forward. So in a lot of cases, my pelvis is really heavy. What if I tilt my pelvis forward to give me that nice counterweight there? Now I have the opposite pelvis situation. I have chronic anterior pelvic tilt, which is me personally, although mine is not quite this pronounced. You can see how now this space back here is overly lifted with the tailbone going back and the low back vertebra compressed. So just a few things for us to keep in mind as we move into the next weeks. I hope that this short little segment gave you just enough to get really excited about using our feet. I know for me personally, in my practice, the foot is just not really that exciting. There are other things that I want to figure out how to do, but really the foot informs everything else. And so the more we can create mobility in our foot, the more we can create control in our foot, the more that that's going to reverberate all the way up. And quite honestly, everything else above that will start to make more sense as well. And I think that's another really big reason why I'm drawn to this way of thinking or this way of moving about the practice, is because I'm always just looking for things to make sense. Because when things make sense, I don't have to spend a lot of time trying to figure them out anymore. You know, it's intuitive, it has some evidence behind it, it has some experience behind it. And so you're just saying, okay, this feels good, let's keep going this way. So join me back here next week, because what we're doing is we're doing a ton of mobility stuff. And then the week after that, we're going to take it directly into our standing yoga postures, and we're going to learn how to use our feet there. So that's all I have for you today, except I do want to let you know that if you want to support these videos, we do have a Patreon community where we give out extra resource guides and we do live calls to do some Q&As and work on anything you've got going on with you. We're spending all of 2019 going over the whole body from foot to head, and we'll learn all of our different yoga poses throughout this time, do a lot of really cool practicing, get a lot of good sequencing in, and hopefully really learn how to move our bodies well. All right, that's it for me. Have a good day, you guys. Thanks so much.